The First World War was to finally settle the question of whether military aviation was more effective than the proud cavalry. This was the start of a new era of war, with able South African pilots in Royal Flying Corps planes establishing a reputation of their own. Air power suddenly became a mighty extension of the fighting arm. In 1915, the South African Aviation Corps was formed for service in Southwest Africa. Many of its men-to-be had already received their baptism of fire and glory in France. They were worthy predecessors of the Air Force. The Corps was equipped with Henry Farman all-steel biplanes. As the eyes of General Botha, working far ahead of the main ground forces, the Corps was instrumental in the defeat of Van Franke by General Botha. The same year saw the creation of 26th Squadron from the South African Aviation Corps. Captain van der Spey was one of its flight commanders in German East Africa. There were many South African aviators who gave distinguished service in the Great War. Among them were Colonel, later General, Sir Pierre van Reineveld, KBE, CB, DSO, MC. Lieutenant, later Major General, Butti Venter, CB, DFC and Bar, later Director General of the Air Force in World War II. Captain Andrew Beecham Proctor, BC, DSO, MC, DFC. Killed at the spirited age of 24, his heroic exploits, including 54 victories, earned him the highest decorations. The formation of the South African Air Force was actually made possible by the splendid gift of 100 aircraft from the Imperial Government of England. The aircraft and equipment, including hangars, was worth £2 million. The first hangars went up at Swartkop near Pretoria. The first office was a converted aircraft crate. The planes were shipped to South Africa and assembled at Swartkop. With them was sent dope, paints, special aero engine oils and complete workshop machinery. The Imperial gift included 48 DH-9s, 22 Scout-type SE-5s. The first activities of the fledgling Air Force were concentrated on cooperating with civil authorities in a wide variety of situations. One of them was an experimental airmail service between Cape Town and Durban in 1925. 10 aircraft were stationed at strategic points along the coast for the service. Gradually, the public became more air-minded. The sight of a flying machine came to be regarded as something quite normal. At the popular aviation shows, the Air Force gave flying displays. These were the invigorating days of open cockpit flying. This was the experience of total freedom from the earth. Man was using the air. It was a new adventure. The 10 years on, from 1925, saw the SAAF develop its flying training program. A central flying school was established, and by 1928, more than 5,000 hours had been flown. At the same time, the far-sighted Royal Air Force had surveyed a chain of airfields down the continent. Working together, both air forces used the route for flight training. Even before the 30s, South Africa was constructing her own aircraft, the Wapiti. Engines and instruments were imported, but all other parts were made locally. 27 Wapiti were built in this way. Later, 51 Avro Tudors and 65 Hartbeers were to be constructed. The great Union Day Parade of 1934 showed the public the strength and resolution of its defense force. The parade was one more occasion when the Air Force took to the skies to show its capabilities. There was pride in the small planes. There needed to be. In Europe, a voice was sounding the message of Nazi menace. Years after the formation of the Air Force, Union Airways was taken over by the railways and harbors. Ironically, the Airways Ju-52s came from Germany. There, a devilish force was mustering the clouds of war. In 1939, the dreaded conflict came.
Their hope is now to prolong the struggle so that perhaps differences will arise between friends and allies, so that perhaps the democracies whom they despise and whom they of the war.
And under Smuts, South Africa prepared to go to war. The Air Force had precisely 160 permanent officers and a handful of aircraft. Airways Ju-86s were converted and organized into 4 flights to patrol the vital Cape route. Later, the patrols converted to ensigns. In May 1940, the slender air resources moved to East Africa. 1 fighter squadron on Hurricanes and 11 bomber squadron on Hartbeers were later joined for the campaign by 12 bomber squadron on Ju-86s. Operations started in June when Ju-86s flew against the Italian forces. The Abyssinian campaign was a difficult one for the SAAF. At first, it had only 40 aircraft to fly against the 300 planes of the Italians. Despite these odds, the SAAF was not intimidated. The Ju bombers of 12 Squadron smashed at Italian strongholds with terrible effect. Apart from its bomber role, the famous